BronxNet. Your voice, your views, your vision.
Good evening and welcome to BronxTalk. Since May, there have been 13 anti-gay attacks in Manhattan, a startling number. Happily, the numbers are not as high in the Bronx, but as we understand, there are incidents not being reported. But we certainly would like to keep those numbers as low as possible. Last week, a coalition of Bronx elected officials, advocates, and concerned citizens got together and put out a plan to combat the increasing anti-gay violence in our city and in our borough, of course. Tonight, we'll review some of those initiatives and also take a look at some of the root causes of this disturbing trend, and we'll see how we can make our borough of the Bronx a place where everyone is welcome and respected and treasured for who they are. If you want to weigh in with your comments or questions, then please call in at 718-960-7241 or email them to us at bronxtalk@hotmail.com. And we'll read those on the air during a future edition of our program. We've got a wonderful panel for you. Please join me in welcoming the council member from the 8th Council District, represents neighborhoods in northern Manhattan and parts of the South Bronx. Council member Melissa Mark Viverito, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
And also a member of the board of the Bronx LGBTQ Center, Chad Young, and we'll say good evening and tell our viewers also Mr. Young also defends a number of people who have been the victims of anti-gay violence in the Bronx, and so we'll be able to get some inside word on that. And also, calling in from Albany, we say welcome back to Senator Jose Marcos Serrano. Good evening, Senator. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, thank you very much for having me, Gary.
Great. We'll get to you in a moment. Let's start here in the studio. Mr. Young, talk to me about what you see and hear, especially from clients who are victims. What's going on in the Bronx?
Well, I think that people of the LGBT community are being victimized at all ages, from young to senior citizens living in nursing homes here in the Bronx. And I've heard from all aspects of the community. This recent events that have been happening in Manhattan has just given us a spotlight so that people like you are being made aware that these incidents are going on. The ones in Manhattan are being reported, and we're hearing a lot about it. There's been a lot of media coverage about it, but we're not hearing a lot about incidences that are happening in the Bronx. And we know they're happening in the Bronx.
We all heard about that horrible incident. I think it was after a Knick game, a Knick playoff game. I can't even think about it, really, because it disturbs me so much. What kinds of things are happening in the Bronx that maybe are underreported?
Everything from slurs being shouted at people walking down the street, people that may look different, people that may be wearing certain clothes, people that may not otherwise fit into their communities, people who are just trying to be themselves and dress and act and the way that they want to conduct their lives. A lot of slurs are being yelled. There's been many incidences of physical violence against these people.
And give me an example of how that works. Somebody's walking down the street and then somebody literally starts chasing them with a baseball bat?
Well, I haven't heard of an incident where someone chased them with a baseball bat.
I'm just speculating. I just want to get some
Well, I have heard incidences
examples
of a group of 4 people throwing one individual up against a wall. That individual was injured, thank God not in a life-threatening situation. More often than not, it's just the slurs that are being shouted at these people.
Council member, this, I guess, is not illegal to shout at somebody in the street. What do we do? I mean, you can't lock somebody up for saying, using a bad word in the street. but give me your perspective on just that kind of thing that's happening.
Well, I mean, it's really deplorable that we would have situations in the city of New York where people cannot be themselves and not get abused in any which way. I think what we have a responsibility, whether it's community leaders or nonprofit organizations and us as elected officials, all the more so to really send that consistent message that everyone is welcome, that everyone is accepted, and that we will not tolerate any sort of violence. And that message has to be consistently brought into communities where that level of unacceptance may be a little bit greater. That's why Senator Serrano and I are very strong allies on this issue, and we felt very much compelled to do a workshop jointly where we were bringing community members together to talk about homophobia, transphobia, different sorts of phobias, and really saying, trying to get people to explain to us why do they feel that this exists, what can we do as a community to try to eradicate it or to address it. But I think the consistent messaging and us really going out there whenever an incident happens, taking our streets back, sending information out, making sure that that message is consistent, that we will not accept violence against any member of our community.
Senator Serrano, talk to me about trying to educate people who are, for want of a better word, unenlightened.
Well, in our community, there really is a great need for education. We've seen large amounts of homophobia and transphobia everywhere throughout the city, but particularly in communities of color, where there seems to be even a lower level of tolerance. This is really where, as the councilwoman mentioned, where the elected officials really do need to be extremely proactive. And it really should go beyond teaching tolerance, because I don't really like that word tolerance. It almost sounds like I will tolerate you, I still hate you, but I will tolerate you. I think we should go beyond and start teaching about celebrating the diversity that is actually part of the Bronx in New York City, and celebrating what makes us all the same and what makes us all different. And I think that is really what needs to happen. And that education process, as you mentioned, Gary, it's something that has to be extremely proactive, because in many ways it's generational, and we need to ensure that the newer generation, the younger generation, do not inherit many of the bigoted attitudes that their previous generation had.
Senator, isn't it ironic that people who may have come in as immigrants and were oppressed because of the language that they speak, and I'm just using the premise that you just laid out for us, and may have been oppressed because of the color of their skin, would then potentially be the ones to go out and infringe upon somebody else who looks different or acts in a different way? Isn't it somewhat ironic? I mean, I don't know if it's more or less disturbing, but you said it comes from communities of color. That seems a direct conflict. One would think they would know better than anybody. You know what? If he's different or she's different, that's fine with me.
Well, it's sort of like the last frontier of discrimination. The fight for social justice for the LGBTQ community is really the civil rights movement of our time. Previous generations and immigrant generations, they did feel oppressed, and they continue to feel oppressed. But it's almost like someone who is a bully was probably bullied themselves when they were younger.
That's interesting, yeah.
And they're just doing the same thing to someone else. And I think it is painfully ironic, but it is unfortunate. And I think in communities of color, in the Latino community, there needs to be a renewed sense of openness, because what you have is an LGBTQ youth community that oftentimes find themselves on the street, find themselves in homeless situations, find themselves at higher rates of exposure to HIV and AIDS than other populations, and it's all because there is this sort of intolerance within the community, within our families, within the community. We have to pull that out, because that's how we're going to save lives.
Mm-hmm. Council member, how much of this, I don't know that you can quantify it, but hypothetically, how much of this is because of either religious views or traditional views? Again, everybody's entitled to whatever views they have, of course, as long as they participate in their own, religion or activities. How much of this comes out of traditional taboos and traditional cultures in the Hispanic community?
I think, we were talking about this at the forum. I think that obviously we talked about also maybe what role our houses of worship may play in this. I know growing up in Puerto Rico and the gay rights movement taking really strong position right now and gaining a lot of ground, a lot of the opposition and the vitriol and unfortunately the hatred that is being spewed are being spewed by religious leaders. And so that is an unfortunate reality that sometimes may transfer over into our communities as we migrate and as we establish ourselves here. And that's not to say there are obviously those within the religious community that are very accepting and that there are houses of worship that are welcoming. So we can't just paint a broad brush. But unfortunately, what we have to do is we have to build the society we want to live in. And what I was saying at the forum is we also cannot silo our issues. Just because this is an LGBT issue and a struggle doesn't mean it belongs
for that
community. As the way I advocate for immigrant issues, that doesn't just belong to the immigrant community. We have to build the society we want to live in. We all have a responsibility to each other to ensure that we protect each other, that we stand up for each other, and that we say this is the world we want, this is the community we want. And that voice and message consistently needs to come, as the Senator was saying, be proactive, those of us that are in leadership positions.
Mr. Young, let's do one more political question. Then I want to review, there was a list of initiatives put forth, and we're going to just review them a little bit. But, we just had the passage of the gay marriage bill in New York, and just before the show, you were talking about your hopes for a Supreme Court decision. One would think that would have been somewhat instructive, and rather than have a spike in violence of this nature, that maybe people would say, well, okay, the state of New York has now endorsed gay marriage, it's now part of our culture, or whatever you want to think it is what it is, and yet we've had a spike. Is there a relationship, or are they unconnected, or how do you see that?
I don't know that they're connected. I fully agree with both the councilwoman and the senator that this is a whole cultural and society issue. There are many, many battles going forward in the in the field of LGBT rights. Gay marriage is just one of them, and hopefully we're just on the brink of getting an amazing Supreme Court decision that can really bring justice to a large number of our community. But that's not the only fight. Marriage is not the only battle. There's also the battle, like we're talking about now, of people being discriminated against just going to the grocery store, going to school every day. And that's one of the things that the LGBTQ Center of the Bronx wants to help out with by creating helplines for people to call. We have an elder abuse program for people to call. So no matter what age you are, whether you're a young child, a college student, someone in the workforce, or someone in the nursing home, we want to create an avenue to make them feel comfortable, to come and educate us what's going on out there.
I wonder if, ironically, after the gay marriage bill was passed in New York, if it, created some kind of response to it, a reactive response, that maybe people who weren't thrilled with it, went a little off the deep end. I don't know. I guess it's all speculation.
Unfortunately, many of the attacks the perpetrators, the criminals doing these attacks have not been caught. Thank goodness the person that ended the life of Mark Carson has been caught. It's my understanding that through the investigation, and I don't know all the details of the investigation, but he did not connect his attack with the gay marriage issue. And that is the only one that I know so far that's actually been caught. So I think without talking to these criminals that are out there committing these crimes, I don't know that we know the answer to that.
I'm just going to run through very quickly the 6 initiatives. The center announced 6 outreach initiatives. They're going to have a Friday Community Safety Nights, a program that will start in just a week or so, June 21st, and this is all in the Bronx. Monthly town hall meetings, which will begin in August. They're going to partner with a program to bring over the rainbow panels to the Bronx in some of the town hall meetings. They'll have a LGBTQ Pride and Health Fair in Crotona Park, where speak-outs and safety demonstrations will be held, self-defense workshops and sharing information, et cetera, et cetera. I want to start with a council member on this, and maybe we'll go all the way around. Senator, you can weigh in. To me, these are, of course, all wonderful initiatives, but I wonder and I fear, are these initiatives going to the people who are fair-minded to begin with, and really the people we need to deal with are the children in school and the families who don't feel the same way that maybe some of the people on the panel feel. And I guess the question is, how do we really get in there and change people's minds and actions?
Well, I think again, it's a consistency of effort. I think we have to be like when we talk about the anti-bullying message, right? Within that context, and we're talking about that curriculum in the schools, there has to be talk about homophobia. There has to be talk about homosexuality and sexuality in general. When you talk about bullying and not allowing bullying to happen because someone may be gay or may be different, and people reacting to that. So that's in a school setting. These outreach forums that are being discussed, we have to take this issue into all corners of New York City. We can't just say the gay issue is going to be relegated to gay communities or established gay communities in New York City, like Chelsea or other parts. No, this is an issue where we have to discuss it in every corner of New York City to say this is something that is part of the fabric of our society, part of the fabric of our communities, and we want to make sure we're discussing it in areas where typically maybe we're not having those conversations. So again, integrating this into every aspect of our life, and also finding ways that we can integrate it into also a church setting, possibly, or or in the messaging that is being sent out there. And I think that's the way we have to reclaim that and make sure that we're not creating unnecessary stigmas by not discussing it in every aspect of our lives.
I'm going to maybe posit something that will answer my own question, but Senator, I'll give you a chance to weigh in on it in a second, and that is that if you have these events and they're publicized and then people see them as kind of normal events, maybe it's like, well, this is just part of life in the Bronx, and so there's no reason to think somebody's different. It's much like you would have at a church group event or a Democratic Society event or whatever else. Senator, did you want to respond to my question?
Right. Well, Gary, what you said just now, you hit the nail on the head. It's amazing that in this day and age, we think about how far we've come in areas of civil rights and human rights, that there is still this level of homophobia and transphobia and violence. It's almost like people think that that's the one area where bigotry is acceptable. But the way that you change that is by, again, just continuing to get the message out there. The media plays a big role in spreading the word of what's going on. And we're talking about Crotona Park. Every year there is the Bronx Pride event in the summer at Crotona Park, and oftentimes I'm the only elected official who shows up. But that event, I always comment, 20 years ago would have never happened in the middle of Crotona Park in broad daylight, where there would be a celebration of pride and community where people are out in the open, out of the closet, and no one is attacking or saying anything in that context. And I think it shows that our community in areas like the South Bronx, they're actually ready to really understand that there is a diverse culture that we live in and embrace it. And I really think there are a lot of people out there, whether they be gay or straight, who are willing to fight for anti-violence and equality for LGBTQ.
I think I'm just going to make an open invitation for heterosexual people to come out to the party too. It sounds like it'll be a wonderful event, embracing people of all kinds.
We still have, if I could say, we still have such a long road to go. It's really unfortunate. I consider myself an extremely strong ally on these issues, and even to this day, I get, in terms of back ways, people saying, "Well, you must be gay if you're advocating so strongly for these issues," right? Or there's so much stigma attached. The idea that we can't be strong advocates for civil rights and human rights for all. I think that continues to show the challenges that we have as a society in terms of being able to just accept that everyone has a place in our community, everyone has a place in our society, and that we will not tolerate any sort of vitriol against any member of our community.
Councilmember,
and one thing, if I could jump in on that, Gary, and pick up on the councilwoman's remark, she's absolutely right. And one of the vehicles that I think can help change this dynamic is the arts. And this is why Melissa and I, we're such big proponents of the arts, and I worked in theater for many years before becoming an elected official. The arts is one of those areas that kind of transcends so many of the negative things within our society, whether you're gay or straight. It's the whole creative background that really draws people together, and people work side by side, and it's a really wonderful thing. And I think the more that we promote the arts throughout our city, the more that we promote the arts and expose our children to music and art, the more you'll see it break down barriers.
I wanted to ask the council member about curriculums in school, and we talked about school children. you as a council member, you work with people involved with the DOE. Can we get advocates like Mr. Young and some of others into schools to really have discussions, open, frank discussions, or are these things closed in the city of New York?
No, I mean there are the curriculums that are taught in the schools. We also do have the Respect for All week. And so this conversation comes where we bring
Respect
people
for all week. Okay.
Where it's a week of activities where people do come into the schools and talk about experiences and talk about like bullying, or may talk about homophobia, or may talk about other forms of violence, and saying that we have a place, everyone has a place. And so that message is happening in different ways. And I'm sure that we can get creative. There is a curriculum. We could get creatives on figuring out how we can bring personal experiences into the school setting as a way of really, again, of expanding the viewpoints of our children.
And you think the DOE would be open to it in maybe in individual schools in some ways?
I think when we start seeing a rise in any type of violence, it merits us taking a real serious look at how we do that.
Mr. Young, we had two major athletes, one in basketball and one in soccer, come out recently. Yet at the same time, right now we're having a trend of athletes who are still flippantly using offensive language. So I'm trying to figure out, when I was preparing for the program, I was trying to figure out, are we progressing or regressing? In other words, it's almost like at the same time I was pleased, of course. On one hand, many people said it's not even news. They are who they are and let them just go about their business. Right. On the other hand, it is a nice thing that they felt comfortable enough to come out. And then again, we hear time and time again, athletes in the locker room and in front of fans and in front of the media saying things that are offensive. What's your perspective?
Well, the whole gay rights effort has been a very long, slow process. I mean,
I suppose like any civil rights
absolutely. I mean, the Stonewall riots occurred in 1969, and we've been fighting ever since 1969 for a better way of life for the community. So these first athletes that have come out have done a wonderful thing. I think they're making a platform that will make it easier for the younger generation. You mentioned the fact that it was the senator who mentioned the fact that this is a generational thing in many respects. The fact that young kids look up to professional athletes and they see these professional athletes coming out and being true and honest to who they are, it will make them more comfortable to come out themselves if that's what they want to do. And also it helps establish that you can do whatever you want to do. So if someone is thinking he or she may be gay or lesbian, but they can't do certain things because a gay or lesbian has never done that, these professional athletes coming out is showing those young children, I can do anything I want to do. If it's play professional basketball, I can play professional basketball.
Unfortunately, and if tell me if I'm wrong, but I understand a couple of the victims that had been written as going to appear at some of the press conferences that were held recently did not. And will make an assumption because they didn't really feel comfortable at this point doing that. And I have tremendous empathy and sympathy for that. Talk to me about somebody who might be watching the show now saying, whatever it is, maybe they were or were not a victim, but they're not able to fully express and come out whether to their family or to their community of exactly who they are and what they're about. Who do they turn to? Is there help in the Bronx? I mean, I know the answer is yes, and he's going to give me the answer. But right. where do they turn to? And I'd like to reach out to those people to say, you know what, we're all in this together.
Right. Well, hopefully they do have some friends that they can go to.
It's a good start.
Hopefully they have some mentors that they can go to. They can certainly come to the Bronx LGBT Center. There are not just our center, there are many organizations out there. There's SCAN, which is another organization here in the Bronx that really focuses on young children. Whether gay or straight, it makes no difference, but they definitely have some initiatives and programs for the LGBT youth in the Bronx. They can go there, they can come to the center. But I think it's most important to go to someone that you're already friends with. Or maybe, if it's not your parents, maybe another family member, an aunt,
teacher
an uncle, a cousin, a teacher, absolutely.
Somebody who you've become close with, yeah?
Exactly. Just find someone that you're comfortable with that you can talk to.
What I want to do before we run out of time, then we'll go around and talk to everybody again, is review some of the numbers that we have. We have phone numbers of the various task forces. So, Jane, if you could put them up on the screen, I'm just going to call them out. But really, we don't want anybody to not feel like there's not help. And I know there's a crying out for it, and we want to lay it out there. So there's the Hate Crimes Task Force at 646-610-5267. There's the NYPD's Liaison's Office at 212-614-6748. There is also the New York City Anti-Violence Project's free and confidential 24-hour bilingual hotline at 212-714-1141. You can speak with a trained counselor and seek support. You can also report violence online anonymously at avp.org. And the biggest news of all, maybe, of today's show is that the LGBT Center in the Bronx has a new helpline that is now open and running at 347-LGBT-HLP. And that certainly would get you closer to people like Mr. Young and many of his colleagues.
And if I may comment on some of these lines, you can certainly call any of these lines, but we've heard at the center that many people are apprehensive about going forward to the police, but let me say that the New York City Police Department has done an amazing job and continue to do an amazing job in addressing these hate crimes that are going on. They have a special task force. They have gay and lesbian liaisons in every borough, certainly here in the Bronx.
Or again, we want people to feel comfortable. Call the LGBT Center in the Bronx and they'll help you sort it out. You can have an attorney like Mr. Young work with you to figure out what the best way to go. We have just about a minute left, so I'm going to give you and the Senator 30 seconds each. Do we have enough legislation on the books, or is there something burning and you say, gee, if I could change the city charter in some form, this is what I'd like to see?
I mean, I think where it is, I mean, we have legislation. I'm sure that there's other aspects of legislation we can introduce. But it is about the messaging, the consistency, what the leadership roles, the being proactive, very much about sending a message of acceptance. I'm not going to say tolerance because I don't like that word either, but acceptance and making sure we break those barriers down.
For the record, I didn't use it at the top of the show either. Senator Serrano, you got, I don't know, what do we got, 20 seconds left, whatever you got, you want to have a way of summing this up?
I agree with the Councilwoman. There is plenty of hate crimes legislation and laws on the books already, but what we really need to do is make sure that we adequately fund the organizations like the LGBTQ Center and other similar situations so that youth, especially in poor communities who maybe can't come to their parents or grandparents when they've been the victims of crime, think about the level of isolation they must feel if they can't even come to their parents when they've been attacked. They don't know who to turn to, and they just internalize it, and it becomes a big problem for them.
Senator, we got to tell you good night and hope you travel back safely from Albany. But that's really what, in my mind, what the show is about, to reach out and say there is a community. And the community is involving a lot of people, elected officials, talk show hosts, advocates, and attorneys, and all kinds of other people. Chad Young, thank you so much.
Thank you very much for
Senator
having us.
Serrano, thank you. Melissa Mark-Viverito, thank you. And folks, if you have further comments or questions on anything you heard on tonight's show or anything going on in the Bronx, then email them to us at bronxtalk@hotmail.com or make a comment on our Facebook page, and we'll read those on the air during a future edition of our program. You can be a fan of Bronx Talk on Facebook as well. We urge you to do so. Archives of the show are available at bronxnet.org. You click Bronx Talk. It's on the bottom right-hand navigation bar. And next Monday night, we'll be back with more. I don't know what we're going to do yet. We'll do something good, as we always do. Monday nights at 9, thanks to producer Jane Folloro, director Shirley Arrieta. Dina is our studio coordinator, and our cast of thousands around here and in the booth. Thank you to them, and to you, good night.